A man sits in a borrowed room in the port city of Corinth. The winter wind off the Aegean Sea rattles the wooden shutters. But if you look closer at the specific, dirty, agricultural metaphor Paul uses to anchor his climax, at the violent reality of ancient farming practices, cultivated root system of Israel, the graft is not an agricultural strategy. It is a biological impossibility. The root does not need the wild branch to survive. The wild branch brings absolutely nothing to the table. It brings no good fruit, no superior spiritual genetics, no long history of covenant faithfulness. It only brings its desperate need for sap. And yet, the ancient tree absorbs the shock of the iron blade, splits its own bark, and shares its life-giving oil with the very branches that, by all natural laws, should have been gathered up and thrown into the fire. It is a staggering picture of unearned grace. But there is a fatal flaw in human nature, especially in the crowded house churches of Rome. When the wild branch starts to feel the ancient sap rushing through its veins, it rarely responds with gratitude. You know this arrogance. You have seen it. We do it in our own lives. We experience a moment of sudden grace. We feel the rush of new life. We look at the people who failed. We look at the people who stumbled. We look at the people who were broken off. And we start to look down. The Gentiles, in Rome, looked at the Jewish believers walking back into the city. They looked at their dusty sandals. They looked at their battered history. You start to see something the academic reading completely misses. Romans 11 is not a polite theological explanation of replacement. They looked at the empty seats they had filled, and they made a deadly calculation. They felt the sap. They saw their own green leaves. They forgot the knife. They assumed God had permanently changed his mind. Paul hears this. Paul stops it dead. Romans chapter 11, verse 18. Do not be arrogant toward the branches. If you are, remember, it is not you who support the root, but the root that supports you. Read that again. Feel the weight of it in your chest. You do not hold the tree up. The tree holds you up. Your green leaves are not your own. Your spiritual life is borrowed. You are drinking from a well you did not dig. You are resting on a root system you did not plant. You are breathing in a covenant that was cut in the desert centuries before you were born. This is the danger of the phantom replacement. For 2,000 years, large parts of the Christian world have looked at the Jewish people and assumed God simply moved on. We assume the promises were reassigned. We assume the ancient trunk was chopped up for firewood. We look at the massive, sprawling branches of the global church, and we assume God planted a brand new tree. But look at the metaphor. Look at the wood. God does not plant a second tree. The church is not a replacement. It is a desperate, bloody attachment. It is the story of a violent, unnatural, bleeding collision. To explain what God is doing with the world, Paul does not choose the image. We are guests. We are the wild wood. We are the anomaly. Every time a Gentile believer opens a Bible, they are reading Jewish mail. Every time we break the bread of communion, we are participating in a Jewish Passover. Every time we say Amen or Hallelujah, we are pulling breath through our lungs to speak a Hebrew word. We have been spiked into a story that was running for thousands of years before we ever showed up. The arrogance of the wild branch is forgetting the violence of the graft. It is looking at the natural branches lying on the dirt and assuming they are dead forever. It is looking at the broken pieces of Israel and assuming the story is over. But Paul is not finished. He looks down at the broken branches scattered on the ground, and he drops a theological anchor that changes how you read the entire Bible. Look at the dirt surrounding the base of the ancient trunk. The natural branches are lying on the ground, the silver leaves curling and drying under the Mediterranean sun. To the Gentile believers sitting comfortably in the house churches of Rome, these branches look utterly dead. They look like discarded kindling, waiting for a match. They look like a people God has finally, permanently left behind. But Paul writes a single sentence in Romans chapter 11, verse 29, of a pristine courtroom. He does not choose the image of a perfectly ordered temple. He chooses a tree, but not just any tree, that completely dismantles the theology of replacement. For the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. The Greek word translated as irrevocable is ametameletos. It is a heavy, unyielding term drawn from the worlds of law and psychology. It literally means to be without regret, or something that cannot be taken back. In the Roman legal system, an edict that carried this weight could not be overturned by a newly appointed governor, nor could it be erased by a shift in political power. The hot wax seal was final. When the Almighty cuts a covenant, he does not experience buyer's remorse. When he told a wandering Aramean named Abraham to look at the stars, when he walked as a smoking firepot between the halved carcasses of animals in the pitch black of Genesis 15, he did not cross his fingers behind his back. Romans 11:29 is not a motivational quote about your personal career or your hidden talents. It is a massive geopolitical anchor dropped directly over the Jewish people. Paul is explicitly stating that God did not change his mind when the nation stumbled. The divine calling was not revoked when the religious leaders in Jerusalem rejected the Messiah, nor was it canceled when the heavy iron spikes were driven through his wrists. The breaking off of the natural branches was a tragedy. Yes, but Paul insists it was a strategically permitted tragedy. The text argues that a temporary blindness fell over Israel specifically so that the wild, pagan wood could be violently grafted into the bleeding bark. The broken branches are an olive tree. The olive tree is the most stubborn living thing in the Mediterranean. It can live for thousands of years, not discarded refuse. They are dormant heirs, even while they lie in the dust, disconnected from the visible life of the tree. Paul declares that they are still fiercely loved on account of the patriarchs. The deep, underground root system established with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is still throbbing with life, and God has not forgotten the wood that originally grew from it. But if God is not finished with the broken branches, a terrifying and beautiful question remains. What exactly happens when the master of the orchard decides to pick them back up from the dirt? Step back into the grove. The dirt is dry. The broken branches lie scattered on the ground. The Mediterranean sun bakes the wood. The silver leaves are brittle. The edges are curling. The branches look utterly lifeless. The Roman farmer does not walk away. He does not wipe his blade and abandon the orchard. He bends down. He reaches into the dust. He picks up the severed branches. He wipes the dirt from the bark. He feels the dry, dead weight of the wood in his bare hands. He walks back to the ancient, towering trunk. He raises the heavy iron knife one more time. The knife flashes. The bark splits. The sap bleeds. He takes the original branches, the ones he cut off seasons ago, and presses them violently back into the open wound. Paul asks the Roman house churches a devastating question. Its roots are famous for shattering solid limestone just to find a drop of water. You can burn an olive tree to the ground. If a wild, bitter branch can survive this procedure, what happens when the original wood is returned to its own roots? The wild branch fought the sap. The wild branch had to be forced to drink. The wild branch was an anomaly. But the natural branch knows the root. The cellular structure matches perfectly. The internal veins align. The biological connection is instantaneous. The ancient sap rushes up the wood. The water pushes relentlessly through the dry barriers. This is not a slow, gradual recovery. It is a biological explosion. Romans chapter 11, verse 15. Paul writes, the climax of the entire theological argument. For if their rejection means the reconciliation of the world, what will their acceptance mean but life from the dead? Life from the dead. Resurrection. On a cellular level, the dry bark swells. The silver leaves unfurl. The dead wood breathes. God is not cultivating two different trees. He is not maintaining a Jewish vineyard on one side of the mountain and a Gentile orchard on the other. He is not running two separate, isolated programs for human salvation. He is cultivating a single, massive, Scared. Beautiful trunk. Wild wood gathered from the pagan empires. Natural wood, born from the lineage of Abraham. Both grafted. Both bleeding. Both entirely dependent. Both drinking desperately from the exact same underground spring. The tree is not a monument to human achievement. It is a testament to divine persistence. The tension in that Roman house church was based, cut it down to a jagged stump, abandon it in a decade-long drought, and a green shoot will still miraculously push its way up, on a lie. The Gentiles thought they had permanently replaced the Jews. But you cannot replace the branches when you are sharing the exact same sap. The survival of the wild branch is tied inextricably to the return of the natural branch. They need each other. The tree is only whole when all the wood is united. But this ancient, scarred tree, this impossible, unified harvest leaves us with a mirror to hold up to our own lives right now. A prophet watched the first planting burn, and the underground roots survived the ashes. An emperor emptied a city of its original heirs, and wild shoots crept into the empty seats. A sharp iron spike split the ancient bark, and pagan strangers drank from Jewish soil. A wild branch was severed from a bitter past and grafted violently into a holy promise. The natural wood was broken off and left in the dust, and the earth never forgot its name. The master bent down to the dry dirt and gathered the broken pieces for a second cut. The dead branches felt the ancient sap rush through their veins, and resurrection exploded from the stump. One root, one tree, one bleeding, magnificent harvest. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the violence of the graft through the blackened wood. The tree is not a disposable illustration. It is the living, breathing root system of an ancient promise, the Encantrizo. We often want a polite, bloodless religion where we just sign a card, sit in a pew, and get a new label. We forget the heavy iron knife. We forget the tearing of the bark. We forget that as Gentile believers, we were punctured into a parade, story that is deeply, historically Jewish, a story that had to literally bleed to let us in. If you are in a season where you feel like an imposter, like a wild branch dragging a bitter history into a holy place, Romans owns is a place to rest. You do not hold the tree up. The tree holds you. God is not asking you to generate your own righteousness. He is asking, while you to drink from a root system He planted centuries before you were born. Or maybe you feel like the natural branch. Maybe you feel broken off, drying in the dirt, assuming God has finally moved on from you because of your failures. The gifts are irrevocable. The calling cannot be taken back. The master of the orchard is bending down, and may the God who is not afraid to break the laws of nature to bring you home, hold you fast to His ancient root, and fill your dry wood with life from the dead. If this opens something in you, subscribe, leave a comment, even one word helps. Share this with someone who feels like Paul is about to tell the Roman believers that a knife has been taken to this ancient tree, and that wild, on foreign branches they have been broken off and left behind. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts, shoved into the open wounds. But to understand the sheer shock of what Paul is saying to the Gentiles in that room, he holds a reed pen over a piece of papyrus, the ink staining his fingers in the flickering light of an oil lamp. You cannot start in the New Testament. To feel the weight of this metaphor, you have to start centuries earlier, in the ashes of a burning city, with a prophet who watched the first tree catch fire. Read the ancient scrolls. Scan the Hebrew prophets. You will see a pattern. Israel is a vineyard. Israel is a flock. Israel is a wandering bride. But when the text wants to speak of sheer, stubborn survival, the metaphor shifts. The text reaches for wood. The text reaches for roots. Cut an oak tree down, and it dies. Cut a cedar down, and it rots. Cut an olive tree down to the jagged stump. Burn it. Salt the earth around it. Leave it in a drought for a decade. A single season of rain will send a bright green shoot pushing violently through the blackened bark. It refuses to stay dead. That biological reality is why the tree appears at the darkest moment in Israel's history. Jeremiah chapter 11, verse 16. The nation is collapsing. The Babylonian army is massing at the borders. The shadow of a ruthless empire is falling over the limestone walls of Jerusalem. And in the middle of the panic, the prophet delivers a message from God. The Lord called your name a green olive tree, beautiful with good fruit. The word translated as olive tree is the Hebrew zayit. He is drafting a letter to a city he has never seen. He is writing to Rome. He is not composing a systematic theology for a seminary library. It appears nearly 40 times in the Old Testament. It refers to the tree, the fruit, and the oil. But its etymological root points to something deeper. The root of zayit is tied to the concept of yielding brightness. It is tied to the production of light. But an olive only yields its oil through violent pressure. The olive must be crushed. The green flesh must be torn. A massive, heavy stone must roll mercilessly over the harvest before a single lamp can be lit. That reality changes everything. When God names the nation a zayit, He is not making a botanical observation. He is making a prophetic declaration. The tree is not a symbol of easy prosperity. It is an instrument of pressure. And the pressure was coming. Jeremiah's vision does not end with green leaves. It ends with smoke. Read the second half of that exact same verse. But with the roar of a great tempest, He will set fire to it, and its branches will be consumed. The Babylonians arrive. The city burns. The temple is shattered to dust. The natural branches of the zayit are violently broken off. You can smell the burning wood settling over the Judean hills. The tree is reduced to a stump. Centuries pass. The world changes hands. He is writing to a fractured, tense, racially divided community. Jewish believers who had been banished by the Roman emperor have just returned home. Babylon falls to Persia. Persia falls to Greece. Greece falls to Rome. The exiles return. The temple is rebuilt. The branches slowly begin to grow again, reaching up out of the ancient root system, fighting for light in an occupied land. The branches were bruised. The roots were scarred. But they were not dead, because 600 years later, in the heart of the Roman Empire, those ancient roots were about to cause a riot. Picture the imperial capital in the year 49. Dust kicks up from the cobblestones of the Appian Way as heavily armed Praetorian guards march through the Jewish quarter of Rome. Emperor Claudius has just issued a sweeping decree. The Roman historian Suetonius records the event with bureaucratic coldness, noting that the Jews were making constant disturbances at the instigation of a man named Chrestus. With the stroke of a stylus, every Jewish man, woman, and child is ordered to pack up what they can carry and abandon the city. You can feel the panic in the narrow streets as families hastily gather their heavy leather-working tools, strap their belongings to their backs, and flee their homes. In a matter of days, the house churches of Rome are emptied of their founders. The Jewish believers, the men and women who grew up, only to find that the Gentile believers have completely taken over the house churches. The room is crowded. The tension is thick, hearing the Torah chanted in the synagogue. The people who actually understood the ancient root system of their faith are suddenly gone. They leave behind the Gentile believers. These are former pagans, people who used to breathe the thick incense at the altars of Jupiter and Mars, people who have no ancestral memory of a wandering in the desert or a covenant cut in stone. For 5 years, these Gentile believers are left entirely alone in the capital of the world. They step into the leadership vacuums. They form new habits. They build a new culture around the communal table. And as the years pass, they begin to look at the empty seats in the room and make a dangerous assumption. They assume that God has permanently moved on. The exile of the Jewish believers is not a temporary political tragedy to them. It is proof of a divine replacement. Then, the Emperor Claudius dies. The edict expires. And in the year 54, the Jewish believers begin the long, exhausting trek back to Rome. They walk back into the house churches they originally founded, expecting to take their rightful seats. But the atmosphere is thick with resentment. You can hear the friction in the prayers. You can almost feel the cold stares across the table as they try to figure out who is actually in charge. And more importantly, who still belongs. You can feel the coldness when the bread is broken. The Gentiles look at the returning Jews and see obsolete, broken branches. They look at themselves and see the new, preferred planting of God. The arrogance is suffocating. This is the exact powder keg Paul is staring at when he sits down in Corinth to write his letter. He knows he has to dismantle this Gentile superiority before it completely destroys the community. But the detail that changes everything is the specific, violent agricultural procedure he uses to remind them how they got into the room in the first place. Most people read Romans 11 like a modern gardening manual. They picture a serene orchard. They imagine a master gardener carefully snipping a twig with shears. They picture a little bit of twine gently wrapping a branch to a trunk. A peaceful, bloodless transition. A quiet afternoon in the dirt. That is how the modern mind sanitizes the text. But Romans chapter 11, verse 17, shatters that image. Paul addresses the Gentile believers who are puffing out their chests in the house churches. He points to the broken Jewish branches. He points to the empty spaces on the ancient tree. And he tells the Gentiles exactly how they were attached to the bark. Paul knows he has to address the elephant in the room. Most people assume Romans chapters 9 through 11 is just a dense, but if some of the branches were broken off, and you, although a wild olive shoot, were grafted in among the others. The word your English Bible politely translates as grafted in is the Greek enkentrizo. Look at the pieces of the word. The prefix is en. It means into. The root is kentron. It means a sting, a prick, a sharp iron spike used to drive cattle. It appears across ancient Greek literature, and it is never used for something soft. It is the sting of a bee. It is the spear point of a phalanx. It is the iron nail driven into a wooden beam. If feeling the sharp, unpolished edges of these ancient texts is stirring up questions you've never considered, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week we go deeper into the original languages than you knew was possible. So the knife comes out. Kentron is a word of trauma. It is the exact same word used for the agonizing sting of a scorpion. In the book of Revelation, it is the exact same word Jesus uses when he strikes Paul blind on the dusty road to Damascus, telling him, "It is hard for you to kick against the kentra, the sharp iron goads." That root changes everything. Academic treatise about predestination. They treat it as a historical footnote about the Jewish people that you can safely skim past to get to. When Paul describes how the Gentiles were brought into the covenant family of God, he does not use a soft, botanical term. He uses a word of piercing. Enkentrizo literally means to be punctured into, to be spiked into. The grafting is not a polite invitation. It is a bleeding wound. The wild branch had to be severed from its own roots. The ancient trunk of Israel had to be sliced open with a blade. The wood had to be split. The sap had to bleed. Two separate, foreign things are violently forced together so that life can flow between them. It is a traumatic, painful grace. But the detail that makes this specific procedure completely absurd to any first-century farmer is what Paul says in verse 24. Step into a first-century olive grove on the rocky slopes of the Mediterranean. The afternoon sun beats down on the silver leaves. A Roman farmer stands beside an old tree, holding a sharp iron knife, his hands sticky with sap. Every farmer in the ancient world knows the strict, unbreakable rule of the orchard. If a cultivated olive tree begins to fail, you do not graft wild branches into it. A wild olive branch produces terrible, bitter fruit. It is essentially useless to the harvest. The practical, everyday advice in chapter 12. And it is true that these chapters contain some of the heaviest, most complex theology in the New Testament. If you want a crop, the rule is the exact opposite. You cut a good, cultivated branch and graft it onto a wild rootstock. You use the aggressive, stubborn roots of the wild tree to push water and nutrients up into the noble, delicate branch. You never, ever graft a wild branch into a noble root. It ruins the tree. But Paul looks at the Gentile believers in Rome, the former pagans, the outsiders with no spiritual heritage, the wild, bitter branches, and he tells them that God broke the fundamental rule of agriculture just to bring them in. Romans chapter 11, verse 24. For if you were cut from what is by nature a wild olive tree and grafted, contrary to nature, into a cultivated olive tree, how much more will these, the natural branches, be grafted back into their own olive tree? The Greek phrase translated as contrary to nature is paraphesin. It means going against the grain of the universe. It means acting against the established laws of biology. Columella, a Roman writer on agriculture in the 1st century, explicitly warned farmers against doing exactly what Paul is describing, because the wild wood will inevitably dominate and sour the entire yield. The Gentiles sitting in that house church would have instantly recognized how absurd this image was. God took the bitter, unproductive, wild Gentile branches and forcefully spiked them into the rich, ancient,